It's 2025 and a new year means brand new opportunities. And for a lot of you out there, I know you've been thinking about one thing over the holidays, and that is starting your own business. But you have so many questions like, how do I get started? How do I come up with a brand? How do I even sell stuff to people? And what am I even going to sell? Now take a deep breath. Shopify has got you. Shopify makes it simple to create your brand, open for business, and get your first sale. And you can get your store up and running easily with thousands of customizable templates. You don't have to be a coding nerd or a design geek to get this done. All you need to do is drag and drop. Shopify also helps with the details like shipping, taxes, and payments from one single dashboard, so you can focus on the important stuff, like growing your business. Established in 2025 has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/truecrime, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/truecrime to start selling with Shopify today. Shopify.com/truecrime.
I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And this is the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. Welcome back to the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. I'm your host, Alice, and I'm joined, as always, by my familial co-host, Brett.
Alice, it's been so long since I've seen you. It feels like it's been forever. And you're like family to me. I wouldn't be surprised if we shared the same DNA. You're my 10th cousin.
I was going to say you were my 12th cousin, so I guess you think we're closer than we actually are.
Yeah, we'd have to see. I don't know. I've done those DNA tests before, and I got to say I am basically the whitest person in the world.
Share with us what your
DNA
genetic makeup is.
And it's like, there's England, and it's all there. It's like England, Scotland, and Ireland, every single bit of it in basically equal parts. So I'm not a very diverse person, unfortunately.
I've actually never taken a genetic test because I just assume, I don't know how finely they slice it. Like, would it just be like, you're Chinese? or would they be like, you're from the mountains of here? Or they'll just be like, you're of the Asian descent. I don't know.
It is interesting because we've been talking about genetic genealogy so much, but there is a problem that white people like to put their DNA in this stuff, and like other races don't do it as much. I know I went to Cece Moore did a presentation. I saw her do a presentation on this. It was fascinating. And she talked about this, how I can't remember who's second, but it's like a way far down there. So when she was talking about does in particular and how much harder it is to identify Hispanic does, African-American does, and Asian does because you just have so much less DNA to work with. Whereas, like, white people are just putting their DNA in the system willy-nilly, I guess.
And it's really interesting because what we're going to continue to talk about today, of course, is whether you have a privacy right in your DNA. And that's a very interesting thing that they are able to see that people of, like, I don't know, Caucasian white descent are willing to share that information with third parties. Whereas historically, I think, at least in this country, populations that tend to be minorities are more hesitant to share freely their information with whether it be companies or government entities. And I will say that for the immigrant community, that definitely is a more hesitancy to share anything about your life with anyone outside of your more insular immigrant community.
And Sophie just raised Native American groups and in the chat, and that's a really interesting. I actually read an article about that and how a lot of the various nations are very strong on not doing it, not sharing genetic information with these various groups. And it was really fascinating, and a lot of it has to do with who can have membership in the tribes and obviously a lot of distrust in native groups with this kind of stuff. There's all sorts of fascinating issues that come into play when you start talking about genetics and start talking about genetic genealogy. And obviously one of the issues that we have been talking about ad nauseum now for the last few weeks is how it is used in crime fighting, and to the extent in which it should be, and to the extent in which using it in those circumstances might violate somebody's rights. And this is a continuation of our discussion we had last time, and will be a little bit rantier than last time, because basically it's just what we kept talking about when we stopped recording last time, and we just ranted for 30 minutes. Yeah, I mean, we could talk about this till the end of time.
I mean, like, so the generic concern of like, oh, the police, we need warrants. This is something we hear all the time. You need warrants because the police do bad things.
Right.
Okay, what is the bad thing that they would do with genetic genealogy? That is not the same as attacking the genetic genealogy accuracy. So you're saying they're going to go through all this trouble of going through the science of genetic genealogy in order to frame somebody? But they have the DNA. Because Kohberger isn't saying you messed up on your genetic genealogy. That's not the argument. The argument is not you messed up how you did the tree and my 12th cousin actually leads you up a different tree and therefore I'm not the right person. Right. He's saying, well, gosh darn it, you climbed up the right tree and you found me, and I'm trying to attack it. So I do not quite understand the concern, but except that it sounds good to say police are bad. How? How are the police bad, generally, going to affect the fact that you need a warrant in this case, and what are they going to do with genetic genealogy? Because what you're trying to say is they use bad tactics to frame people. That's a whole nother argument and is not about privacy concerns. It is about like lying, planting evidence, drawing inaccurate trees. That would be an expert attack, which is a Daubert challenge, not a privacy concern requiring a warrant.
Right, because usually the privacy concern is like the police had a pretty good idea that the evidence is in the house, right? But we don't want them just breaking into houses willy-nilly just because they think there's evidence there. So they have to go tell a judge why they think there's evidence there so they can break into it. Because you have a privacy interest in your house. We don't want you just breaking into the house. And it's really hard. It's just, it really hurts my head, frankly, to try and understand exactly what Brian Kohberger's argument is. It's like, because it essentially has to be, there are people who there's two possibilities. I'm sure we talked about this. One is there are people who put their information into a database and they didn't check the box to allow the police to look at it. So those people, even though they shared it with a third party, maintained their right to not be a part of a police investigation. I actually don't think you can do that. I actually think you probably can't share your DNA with a third party and opt out of being part of a police investigation, unfortunately.
Just think about it like your trash. You can't be like, that piece of trash I maintain, my whatever over. You need to burn that stuff if you really want to keep it from being discarded.
Yeah, or like click something on your Gmail. This Gmail may not be turned over to the police. This is the one I use for all my child porn, so don't turn this one over to the police. I'm going to check out of the database or whatever, right? I mean, but even assume you can, right? Assume you can. I mean, that's, I guess, the strongest position for Kohberger is they used the DNA of someone who had not opted in to this program to get to my father, which then the direct DNA things got to me.
And in those situations, because we have like creative lawsuits where you find a plaintiff in order to challenge it, they're not even able to say, Jane Doe, we have her agreement and she did not share my DNA with the database. They are living in hypothetical world, and we've talked a lot about this, how we don't live in the world of hypotheticals in our court system, and for good reason. Otherwise, it becomes an advisory court, and we don't have judicial systems to just spout off advisory opinions. We have them for case and controversy. And a hypothetical does not have a case and controversy, nor does this actually have a legal basis to be challenged by Kohberger.
And people keep saying, why do some sites require a warrant? You can say that. Like, you see that in a movie sometimes. The cops walk into the hotel and they're like, I want to see your books. And they're like, you need a warrant to do that, right? I mean, they can say that to the police. But if I go to a judge and I say, I need a court order to tell them to give me this information, and the judge says, okay, here's your order, I don't have a warrant. But is that company going to say, sorry, federal judge, sorry, state judge, I know you have the power to hold me in contempt and fine me lots of money every day, but I'm not going to do it. There's only one company I know of who has the guts to do that, and it's Apple. And Apple does that.
And
Apple
we've
just
won
refuses.
against them.
They just refuse. Yeah, and it's like a constant fight with them. But Yeah.
So that's a really good point, Brett. Maybe people don't recognize or realize the difference between a warrant with a sworn affidavit and a court order like a subpoena that's signed. Those are two different things. So like you said, a court order is just that. You don't need a sworn affidavit. There are only certain things actually that you need a warrant for. Much fewer things than you need just an order, like turn it over because this is in furtherance of an investigation.
And you need a warrant for something that's protected by your Fourth Amendment privacy rights. That's what you need a warrant for. A warrant is to get past the constitutional requirement that the police are not allowed to search your stuff without a warrant. That's what the Fourth Amendment says. But if it's not something covered by the Fourth Amendment, then it may be something where a company like Facebook says, like, look, I can get every single thing you've ever said on Facebook simply by going to a judge and saying, hey, I want that guy's Facebook page because we're doing an investigation. We think he's involved. Judge says, hey, sounds great. Here is the order. And I send that order to Facebook and it comes to me. And that's the way it works. Bank records, that's the way it works. Certain things you start to have a warrant because of privacy concerns. I think you have to have a warrant. Do you have to have a warrant for tax records? I can't remember.
No. It's a provision. There's a statutory provision for it. There's a special order that is provided for by law because Congress got its act together and said, you know what, when you want someone's tax records, you have to meet these certain standards, and you have to meet those standards, but it's not an affidavit in the sense of a search warrant.
And a lot of this is controlled by federal law. So Title III, there are things called Title III warrants. You may have heard of a wiretap. That is a Title III warrant, where Title III of some code, I can't even remember because it's just called Title III, lays out exactly what you have to do to get a warrant to tap someone's phone. So it's almost like Congress has built the way you do it to not get around, but to satisfy the requirements of the Fourth Amendment. And usually when Congress acts in that way and the Supreme Court blesses it, and that's essentially what's happened. The Supreme Court blessed that and said, yeah, that's good enough. What they did is good enough. Now, every state also can have wiretap statutes, and they may be less protective, and you can challenge those. But you got to have a Fourth Amendment interest. And usually when a third party's involved, with the very narrow exception, the narrowest of narrowest possible exceptions in Carpenter, which honestly, if Carpenter went to the Supreme Court today, it would not come out the way it did. It would fail. That challenge would fail. But it was a 5-4 decision that would flip if it came today. But the narrowest of exceptions, where Carpenter was basically like, as I said, they are tracking you every moment of your life. The government asked for 3 years of data. I mean, the government just totally made huge mistakes in that case. That's just too much. We're going to say third-party doctrine doesn't apply. But ordinarily, the third-party doctrine is absolute. If there's a third-party marriage, we talk about this, marriage privilege, spousal communications. Everything you say to your wife is absolutely sacrosanct. And even if you divorce, she can't testify against you about what was said. Unless there was a third party in the room. Oops. Attorney-client privilege.
Same
Your
thing.
attorney-client privilege. You know, Lizzie Borden, to this day, we can't find out what she told her lawyer. Unless the secretary was listening in, or somebody happened to be walking by while they said something. I mean, the third-party doctrine is the problem, is the huge problem for BK, because all of that information, whether it went into a database that had an opt-in policy or not, whether the police used it incorrectly, all of it is in the hands of a third party. And usually when it's in the hands of the third party, the Fourth Amendment simply does not apply. You may still have a tort. You might be able to sue. You know, if you found out that your information that you opted out of was improperly used to get BK and you didn't like that, you could sue the police for violating, maybe. You could try and sue the police for a tort.
And again,
you could sue the database for a tort.
And again, the remedy in that situation is not that genetic genealogy can't be used in Brian Kohberger's case. So note that tort is a civil suit of you, the 12th cousin, and the database or the government for like monetary damages, but not to withdraw their indictment or the way, you know, their investigative procedures that led them to the indictment in order to get the arrest of Brian Kohberger.
Yeah, and Mike's talking about this Google search case. I mean, that's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous that you have a privacy interest in your Google searches. I'm sorry. It's absurd. It's absurd. And yeah, I mean, I don't even know how the Supreme Court would write that. You would have to overturn 200 years of precedent to do that, essentially. Now, if you did that, then I mean, I don't even, like I said, the implications of that case would be so vast. If you actually said that when you type into Google, how do I murder my wife? That even though you're sending that to the Google machine and all the world, and every advertiser in America is now going to be sending you advertisements for books about how to kill your wives and advertisements for knives and everything else, that somehow you still have a privacy right in that is just so absurd. I can't even imagine, but I could be wrong.
Before we move on, I have to tell all of you about a podcast that I think you're going to really enjoy, and that's Deadly Nightmares, the podcast from ID. It tells the real stories of people stalked by serial killers and attackers. On every episode, survivors share the chilling moments they knew their lives were in danger and how they had managed to escape their attacker. Investigators and family members close to the victims discuss the disturbing details of each case and exactly how they happened. These terrifying cases are the stuff of nightmares, but they've happened in real life to real people. After listening to this podcast, you'll never drive alone at night again. Check out one of their first episodes, The Curse of Dismal Creek. It's about a 33-year-old man, Sean Farmer, who's on his way to meet his friend Scott Johnson at a campsite deep in the backwoods of Virginia. They plan to fish along remote Dismal Creek, unaware that the area has a dark past. In 1981, 2 young hikers were murdered there, stabbed and shot by a stranger they met along the nearby Appalachian Trail. Decades later, as Sean starts to set up camp near the same spot, a mysterious stranger appears. Is the terrible history of Dismal Creek doomed to repeat itself? Find out at Deadly Nightmares. Listen to Deadly Nightmares wherever you listen to your podcasts. Think about it this way. So on that Google search thing, let's say I tell Brett, so we're in a lockdown room, no one's listening, no recordings, and I say to Brett, I'm going to kill my husband. I can't keep him from telling the police I said that. He's the Google machine.
I'm the Google machine. Or she asked me how to kill her husband. You know any good ways to kill my husband? I mean, it would be absurd if they were like, she had an expectation of privacy because she thought he promised her that he wouldn't share that with the police, and he left and went straight to the cops. And that was a violation of their agreement. They had a contract, by God. Like, it's just...
So not only is that a ridiculous, expectation of privacy, think about the real life implications. I know we joke all the time. Ivory Tower people, Ivy Leagues, all we do is pontificate and talk in the clouds. Let's talk about reality. If what just happened, I can ask Brett in privacy, he's Mr. Google, and I say, how do I kill my husband? And I have an expectation in privacy in that. You guys, there will be absolutely no recourse for any criminal behavior ever in society. It will literally be the end of rule of law. And you might as well get your guns and hide in your closet because there will be no prosecution of any crimes, no matter how small or large.
Yeah, I don't even know. And look, the Supreme Court always talks about privacy interest. And it's one of those things where it's like so much of this kind of law. When you get to the Constitution, everything gets fuzzy. We all like to act like they're hard and fast rules about everything and blah, 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 right? But in the discussions of this, when we talk about privacy interest, what the Supreme Court will often say is, what is society willing to accept? And is society willing to accept that we are going to keep the police, when you Google how to kill your spouse, and everybody else in the world saw it electronically, but the police can't. We're going to say the police can't see that. Are you willing to accept that? Or do you say, look, once you enter that into the Google machine, you have given up your privacy interest. Yourself, by your actions, you have given up your privacy interest. Same thing with DNA. If you go and murder someone and you leave your DNA all over the place or your fingerprints all over the place, do you still have a privacy interest in your DNA that you left on the knife or not?
With another analogy that maybe can strike a chord with you. Okay, some people have said, but your DNA is so private, it's what could be more private than that, right? What could be more private than that? You kind of need like a lab and testing and other things before you can really take that fingerprint or that trace DNA on that knife sheath to figure out who that is. I would say what's more immediately private would be something like your face, your body. So are you saying that if you walk out in public and there are security cameras that capture you, that is a violation of privacy? No, you have stepped out into the public place. Now, we can't have cameras inside your home, right? But there are security cameras out there. And so if you're saying even your trace DNA that you've left out in the public, not in your own home, we're not going into your home, you've left it out in your crime scene, that is like you being caught on a mall security camera as you lead a small boy who is not yours out of that mall for you to kidnap him and then brutally murder him. The same analogy would apply there, that those security cameras cannot be used to identify you and to follow leads to eventually prosecute you.
Now, look, this is all quaint. If you want to get in like Black Mirror stuff, it's not the cops using genetic genealogy to compare the DNA you left on the knife. Sorry, buddy, you leave the DNA on the knife, you don't have a privacy interest in it. You just don't. I mean, I hope I don't have to express that. Like, if you bleed all over the scene, what's more private than my blood? It's my own blood. I bled my own blood. I have privacy interest in that. How dare you collect that from the scene? Come on. That's ridiculous, right? But what you're going to have eventually is like, you're going to start leaving your DNA places and companies are going to start like sucking it up and doing stuff with it. That's going to be when it gets weird. Like, you go into the Apple store, right? I mean, that's how all these companies make money. Like, Facebook makes money off your private information.
These AI images.
Yeah, AI images. You walk into an Apple store and you're handling their phones, right? And they like, after you leave, they're like, well, they didn't buy a phone, but hey, at least we have all their genetic information. Let's go ahead and package that up and sell it to the genetic information company. I mean, that's when things get weird. Right? And that will happen, because what's more valuable than your DNA?
And here is it. Now we're getting into a kind of, like you said, scary world. We know that certain microphones pick up our voices all the time, and basically our voices can be recreated to create full sentences and minutes, if not longer, of us talking. That is not really us talking.
I've already got an AI contract. The podcast is going to be done by AI from now on.
Right.
We got to stop doing the videos.
So that's a third party doing it. But then, again, your constitutional rights is only against government actors. So I agree with you. That world that we're going down into is a very real world that could exist, could happen one day. But it is different from where we are today with government actors for purposes of criminal prosecution. Which is, again, why when people are like, but the police are bad, so they shouldn't have access to genetic genealogy. I'm like, the government is not advanced enough to use your DNA in a way that private companies can, in a scary way.
And I just want to keep reiterating here. People keep talking about their privacy rights and their DNA. Othram, when we talked about this, their database are people like me who agreed to allow them to use DNA to solve cases. I have decided to let them use my DNA to solve cases. And by God, none of you are going to tell me what I can or can't do with my DNA. And that is the thing where, like, I start to get all fired up about my rights, because I don't understand you. I am telling you, they don't have to have a warrant to use my DNA. I am giving it to them. So don't you put a warrant on me. That's ridiculous. Like, y'all want to talk about terms of service? We can sue them if they violate them, but that is not what, when you start talking about having to have a warrant for Othram to run this technology, what you're saying is all those people who voluntarily gave their DNA to be a part of this, and Brian Koberger, who voluntarily gave his DNA when he left it on a knife after he stabbed 4 people to death, somehow there is a privacy interest in that the only way to vindicate it is to throw that evidence out. That's the American way. Like, I'm sorry. It's very hard for me to make 4 out of 2 and 2 there.
Well, it's all, and, lest you think we're angry, we're not at all. We get very passionate about this. These are all good questions, very good questions. And we're taking them to their logical ends and kind of exploring all of the questions that are raised within them. So these are all fantastic questions. In no way are we saying, oh, it's stupid to even have this conversation. Absolutely not. This is a very interesting discussion to be had. But I think oftentimes those having these conversations in social medias are leaving out all the real costs and all the real factors that you have to consider when you make these wide sweeping claims like we need a warrant for everything, or we can never use genetic genealogy, or 12th cousins get to assert their privacy concerns for a defendant.
Exactly.
All right. Yeah. This is all we have for today. I really hope that you guys all find your family members out there and your podcast
Grant, wherever
hosts.
he is.
Grant, Scott, wherever you guys are. I don't even know who those people are. I'm sorry for writing you out of the show today. But before we sign off, is there anything you want to call me? Because you have free reign. This is like your free punch. You get to call me anything you want.
Alice, I don't even know what to say.
Then don't say anything at all.
This is a good one. It's going to make some great bloopers later. This is, want to know why you should be a patron? Why you should be a patron is so you get to see stuff like this live. That's why you should be a patron.
I can't believe I did. Okay, let's just sign off real quick before I mess this up even more. Well, we hope you guys have enjoyed this rant. And I do mean that when I say this rant is not because of anger or because these are stupid questions. These are not dumb questions. These are not bad questions. These are great questions that require vigorous debate and vigorous thinking and analysis. And that's our point behind all of this. This is not supposed to be subject to one-liner on Twitters as like a mic drop. These are very important discussions to be had. And we hope you guys incorporate these ideas and thoughts as you have this conversation. With that said, Brett, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Those are all great points, Alice. Great points to end on, and I agree 100%. This is a debate that will continue, and it's a debate that we will continue to discuss as we move forward.
Well, until next time, I'm Alice.
And I'm Brett.
And this is the Prosecutor's Legal Briefs. And it's also because Grant was Grant. I don't even know who that is.
Grant.
Scott. Look at me writing you out of the show. I'm just straight up writing you out of the show. I'm so sorry. I've totally written you out of the show. Oh my God. Lest any of you think that I just did a Freudian slip and accidentally called Brett my husband or my children, I did not.
No.
I don't know
any Grants.
I don't know who Grant is. I went to my junior prom with a Grant.
Oh, there you go.
Who I haven't talked to in 15 years.
Wherever you are, man.
Shout out to Grant. I don't know if he listens. I don't know where he is in life. You guys, these are the atrocities of taking care of kids all day, working all day, not eating dinner, and recording. I cannot believe I did that. I am so sorry. You can call me homely anytime. Oh my gosh, I'm sweating right now because I feel so bad. Well, Jason, good luck editing this one.